You know, the late 90s and early 2000s were a wild, fertile time for comedy. Stand up was everywhere, and cable channels were hungry for fresh voices. It was a bit of a golden age for a certain kind of intellectual, edgy humor. Think back to a time before social media dictated every punchline, when comedians could truly push boundaries. This wasn't the era of viral TikTok sketches or polished, politically correct sets. This was the era of raw, unfiltered thought, where a comedian's sharp mind was their greatest weapon. The alternative rock boom of the early 90s had left a cultural residue of cynicism and irony, and a new generation of comedians, figures like Janine Garofalo, Dennis Leary, and a pre-Daily Show Jon Stewart, were tapping into that vein. They weren't just telling jokes about airplane food, they were deconstructing media, politics, and the very fabric of society with a scalpel-like wit. It was a time when HBO and Comedy Central were kings, showcasing specials that pushed the envelope, offering a platform for voices that might otherwise have been drowned out. The clubs buzzed with energy, the air thick with anticipation, and every set felt like a live wire. Greg Giraldo emerged from this ground, a period where quick wit and a cynical worldview were highly prized. He wasn't just a comedian, he was a former lawyer, a Harvard Law graduate, no less. This wasn't just a career change, it was a seismic shift in purpose. Imagine trading in the hallowed halls of justice, the measured cadence of legal arguments, the weighty responsibility of clients' fates, for smoky clubs and the unpredictable chaos of hecklers. Law's a world built on precedent, order, and the meticulous construction of arguments to uphold a system. Comedy, especially Giraldo's brand of it, is built on chaos, subversion, and the gleeful deconstruction of those very systems. That's the kind of unconventional path Greg chose, a path that hinted at a mind too restless for the conventional. He wasn't chasing fame in the way many do. He was chasing an outlet, a way to channel that formidable intellect and a perspective that simply couldn't be contained by legal precedents. It spoke volumes about the man, that he found more truth, more satisfaction, and perhaps more challenge in the fleeting moments of a stand-up set than in the enduring texts of law. He was an outlier, a brilliant anomaly in a world often too eager to categorize its inhabitants. His entry into comedy wasn't just a pivot. It was an act of profound self-discovery, a realization that his true calling lay in dissecting society, one brutal, hilarious punchline at a time. It's a story that resonates with anyone who's ever felt the pull of a different life, the urge to shed expectations and forge their own, often more difficult, path. Born in Queens, New York in 1965, Greg Giraldo wasn't your typical aspiring comic. His upbringing was, by many accounts, conventional for a bright, ambitious kid in a middle-class family with Colombian immigrant parents. There were no early signs of a rebellious streak leading directly to the stage. Instead, his path was one of academic excellence, a trajectory that seemed destined for a life of intellectual rigor and professional prestige. This was the classic immigrant dream playing out, the son who excels, who validates his parents' sacrifices through sheer intellectual horsepower. He didn't just attend Columbia University, he excelled, earning a degree that laid the groundwork for even greater academic pursuits. From there, he didn't just attend Harvard Law School, he conquered it, emerging with a Juris Doctor, a credential that opened doors to the most elite legal circles in the world, the pride of his family, the clear, gilded path laid out before him. He did exactly what was expected, joining the prestigious New York law firm Skadden, Arps, Slate, Meagher, and Flom right after graduation. Now, for those who don't know, Skadden isn't just any law firm. It's a titan of corporate law, a place where the work is punishing, the stakes are astronomical, and the pay is designed to make you forget you have a soul. He was a corporate litigator, immersed in a world of high-stakes decisions and billion-dollar deals. Picture the scene. Endless nights in a sterile, fluorescent-lit conference room, surrounded by mountains of paperwork, fueled by lukewarm coffee and takeout food. This is the world of doc review, the mind-numbing process of sifting through thousands of pages of legal documents, searching for a single, crucial piece of evidence. It's a world where your time is billed in 6-minute increments, a relentless, soul-crushing grind. This man, known for his scathing roast, once debated the finer points of securities law in a boardroom. The image is almost surreal when juxtaposed with the Greg Giraldo we came to know and love. He was living a life many would kill for, but it was a life in a gilded cage. But something inside him wasn't satisfied. The intellectual challenge of law was there, certainly, but perhaps the emotional connection, the raw human element, was missing. Or maybe more simply, the call of a different kind of truth, a more direct and immediate form of communication, began to echo louder than the summons of a subpoena. He started doing open mic nights in the late 80s, a clandestine double life where his legal mind was put to an entirely different test. He was juggling his legal career with his burgeoning passion, burning the candle at both ends, dissecting legal documents by day, and crafting jokes in dimly lit clubs by night. It must have been an exhausting, exhilarating, and ultimately unsustainable balancing act. The structure and discipline of law versus the chaotic, liberating energy of a comedy club, two worlds pulling him in opposite directions. By the early 90s, the call of comedy was too strong to ignore, too insistent to be relegated to late-night hobbies. It had evolved from a passion to a necessity. He made the momentous decision to leave law behind entirely, a move that must have baffled some and inspired others. Think about that choice. He was walking away from a 6-figure salary, from prestige, from security, from everything he had worked so hard to achieve, to chase a dream with absolutely no guarantee of success. This wasn't just a career change. It was a profound act of faith in himself, a leap into the unpredictable world of stand-up comedy, where job security is a myth and success is an elusive beast. He chose the stage over the courtroom, laughter over litigation, the immediate roar of a crowd over the slow grind of legal precedent. His journey wasn't an overnight success. Before he became a household name, he was grinding it out on the comedy circuit, honing his craft. A crucial stepping stone was his regular appearances on Tough Crowd with Colin Quinn. This wasn't your standard talk show. It was a nightly intellectual brawl, a televised smokers' lounge where comedians debated current events. Giraldo thrived in this environment. His legal training made him a formidable debater, able to construct arguments and deconstruct his opponent's points with terrifying speed and wit. He wasn't just telling prepared jokes, he was thinking on his feet, showcasing that brilliant, agile mind in real time. This is where many in the comedy world first took notice of his unique talent, the fusion of high-level intellect with a common man's sensibility. Then, of course, came his big break for the mainstream audience, the Comedy Central roasts. These weren't just guest spots, these were master classes in comedic destruction. He wasn't just on them, he owned them. He approached each roast like a legal brief, dissecting his subject with surgical precision, gathering evidence of their flaws and hypocrisies, and then delivering a closing argument that was brutal, brilliant, and often shockingly insightful. His delivery was a marvel, a casual, almost conversational tone that belied the meticulous craftsmanship of his jokes. He didn't shout or posture, he simply stated the undeniable, hilarious truth with a smirk that told you he knew exactly what he was doing. Think of his roast of William Shatner. The room was packed with comedic heavyweights, all vying for the best joke, And then Greg steps up. He said, "Shatner, you've done everything. You've played a starship captain, a police sergeant, a lawyer, but in every role you played yourself." Ouch. It wasn't just a clever line. It was a profound observation about Shatner's iconic, larger-than-life persona, delivered with a smile that softened the blow just enough to make it acceptable. But it was true, and it was hilarious. He had this incredible ability to be universally loved by the audience, even as he was tearing into the guest of honor. He wasn't mean-spirited. He was just accurate. He found the weak spot, the truth that everyone knew but no one dared say, and then he articulated it with comedic genius. He built a reputation as the guy who could deliver the most cutting jokes of the night, often stealing the show from the headliners. He was the anchor, the one you waited for, knowing he would deliver something unforgettable. And he did it time and time again. At the roast of Flavor Flav, he looked at the Public Enemy hype man and his signature clock necklace and deadpanned, "Flav, I'm not saying you're a bad father, but you have a clock around your neck and your kids' pictures are nowhere to be found." It was a perfect Giraldo joke, a simple, logical observation twisted into a devastatingly funny personal insult. Or at the roast of Chevy Chase, a notoriously difficult subject, Giraldo didn't hold back. "Chevy, let me tell you something. When you're not on screen, you're a bigger Chevy Chase movie than any Chevy Chase movie." Again, it was the truth that made it so powerful. He wasn't just telling jokes, he was delivering verdicts. But here's an untold facet that often gets overshadowed by the spectacle of the roasts. Before the roaring crowds of Comedy Central, Greg was already a deeply respected club comedian, a true craftsman of the stand-up art form. His club material was different from his roast persona. It was more introspective, political, and philosophical. He would use that legal mind to dissect complex social issues, from the Iraq War to celebrity culture, with a logic that was both hilarious and irrefutable. He wasn't just parachuted into fame, he earned his stripes in the trenches. He released comedy albums like Good Day to Cross a River, which showcased his sharp observational humor and cynical worldview, specials that revealed a thoughtful, intricate mind. He was a regular on late-night TV, gracing the stages of Letterman and Conan, where he honed his timing and presence, proving his versatility beyond the roast format. He was a comics comic, revered by his peers long before the wider public fully caught on. Many of his fellow comedians considered him one of the smartest and funniest guys in the business, a sentiment echoed by countless testimonials. There's a story from fellow comedian Jim Florentine, who recalled Greg meticulously working on jokes in the green room, almost like a scientist, ensuring every word landed perfectly. It wasn't about spontaneous brilliance alone. It was about rigorous iteration, about chiseling away at a concept until it was flawless. Florentine recounted how Greg would sit with a pad and pen, trying out different phrasing, different inflections, testing the rhythm and flow of a joke to maximize its impact. He treated comedy with the same intellectual discipline he once applied to law. This wasn't just raw talent, it was dedication, a relentless pursuit of comedic perfection. He approached his craft with an almost academic rigor, analyzing what made people laugh, what made a joke effective, and how to construct a set that built momentum and delivered maximum impact. This behind-the-scenes work, often unseen by the audience, speaks volumes about his commitment to the art form and explains why his jokes always felt so expertly constructed, so perfectly timed. He wasn't just a performer, he was a serious artist dedicated to his craft. Behind the razor-sharp wit and the confident stage persona, Greg Giraldo was a deeply complex individual, a man whose internal landscape was as intricate and layered as his comedic routines. The public saw the quick comebacks and the unflappable demeanor, but beneath that veneer lay a soul wrestling with profound struggles. He battled addiction, not in secret, but with a surprising degree of openness, both in his stand-up and in interviews. This wasn't just a background detail. It was a central theme in his life, one he bravely chose to integrate into his art, turning his pain into a source of connection with his audience. It was a tightrope walk of breathtaking audacity. He was performing an autopsy on his own demons in real time, under the glare of the stage lights. He spoke candidly about his struggles with alcohol and prescription medication, a cycle of sobriety and relapse that was a well-known painful reality within the comedy community. He would weave his personal demons into his comedy with a dark, self-deprecating humor that resonated deeply with audiences. This wasn't an attempt to lighten the burden of addiction. It was a way to process it, to find a sliver of common ground with others who understood struggle, and to infuse his pain with a dose of gallows humor. He once quipped with that characteristic wry smile, "I'm a recovering alcoholic. I'm just recovering from the alcohol, not the alcoholism." It was a line that got a big laugh, a nervous, knowing chuckle from the audience. But it also revealed a profound vulnerability, a deep and unflinching honesty about the insidious nature of addiction. It wasn't just about stopping the drinking, it was about confronting the underlying impulse, the fundamental ism that drove it. This self-awareness, while tragic, also made him incredibly relatable. He wasn't preaching from a pedestal, he was speaking from the trenches, and that authenticity created an unbreakable bond with anyone who had ever fought their own internal battles. But this domestic life was the stage for his most painful and tragic paradox. By all accounts, he adored his children with a fierce, almost childlike purity. Friends recall how the merciless roast master who could eviscerate a celebrity would hours later be on the phone, his voice transformed, talking about his son's Little League game. His returns from the road were often fraught with a desperate need to reconnect, a whirlwind of gifts and affection meant to bridge the gap his absence had created. Yet this profound love was in a constant brutal war with his addictions. He was trapped in a vicious feedback loop. The pressure to provide for his family forced him onto the road, into the profound loneliness of a hotel room in a city whose name he could barely remember. The post-show culture of the comedy club, the free drinks, the adulation, the expectation to be on, provided the perfect triggers for his substance abuse. The resulting guilt over his absence and unreliability over the promises he made and couldn't keep only drove him deeper into the abyss, seeking a chemical silence from the voice in his head that told him he was failing the people he loved most. The final devastating blow came in the last year of his life. His separation from Marianne was not just a divorce. It was the shattering of the one structure he desperately wanted to hold together. For a man whose sense of self-worth was already so fragile, the collapse of his family was the ultimate verdict. It was the horrifying, real-world confirmation of his deepest fear, that he was fundamentally broken, unworthy of the stable, happy life he so desperately craved for his children. Friends universally point to this heartbreak as the catalyst for his final fatal decline. The man who could deconstruct any flawed argument on stage, a master of logic and control, was powerless to stop his own family from falling apart. Ultimately, his story is one of a man who craved the stability of home, but was consumed by the chaos his genius required. His deep love for his family was the most real part of him, but in a heartbreaking final verdict, it was not enough to save him from himself. One particularly poignant detail, often shared by those closest to him, comes from fellow comedian and friend Bill Burr. Burr, known for his own outspoken and often cynical comedic style, frequently spoke about Greg's incredible generosity and kindness off stage, a stark, almost startling contrast to his onstage persona as the witty tormentor. He recounted how Greg, despite his own considerable demons and pressures, would often lend a listening ear, offer sage advice, or simply share a laugh and a knowing glance, even when he himself was visibly struggling. This wasn't superficial camaraderie. It was a deep, empathetic connection. Burr described Greg as a true mentor and a profoundly caring friend, someone who truly invested in the well-being of those around him. He wasn't just a fellow comic. He was a genuine human being who showed up for his friends, a stable presence for others that he struggled to be for himself. This sentiment is echoed by so many of his peers. Sarah Silverman often spoke of his sweetness and his intellectual generosity, how he'd help other comics with their jokes, not out of ego, but from a genuine love of the craft. In the competitive dog-eat-dog world of stand-up, intellectual generosity is a rare currency. It means sitting in a green room after your own set, listening to a younger comic's half-formed idea, and helping them find the core of it, punching up a line or suggesting a different angle. It's an act of mentorship that requires confidence and a profound lack of professional jealousy. It was as if his mind was so vast, so capable, that he had an abundance of brilliance to share. He was the smartest person in almost any room he entered, yet he rarely wielded it like a weapon in his personal life. Instead, he used it to lift others up, a quiet act of grace that stood in stark contrast to the public perception of the merciless roast master. However, a key source of his internal conflict, and one that is rarely discussed, was his own success. The roasts made him a star, but they also put him in a box. He was a brilliant stand-up comedian with a wealth of insightful, thought-provoking material about society, politics, and the human condition. Yet the public increasingly clamored for the roast guy, the insult comic. It's a classic tragic tale in many ways, the artist becoming a prisoner of his own greatest hit. Friends noted that he sometimes felt like a trained seal, expected to perform the one trick that made him famous, while his more nuanced, more personal work was overlooked. Imagine the frustration. You spend months crafting a deeply personal, intricate hour of stand-up, only for the audience to shout, "Roast somebody," from the back of the room. This created a chasm between his artistic identity and his public persona, a dissonance that surely contributed to his feelings of unease and dissatisfaction. Was he truly being seen for his mind, or just for his ability to craft a perfect insult? This artistic frustration, coupled with the immense financial pressure of being the sole provider for his family, a pressure that made turning down a high-paying roast almost impossible, created another gilded cage. He was famous and successful, but he wasn't always free. There was a genuine warmth beneath the cynicism, a sensitivity that perhaps fueled both his brilliance and his pain. His incredible intellect, that Harvard-trained mind, allowed him to see the absurdities and hypocrisies of the world with a clarity that was almost painful, making him a master satirist. But that same sensitivity, that same hyper-awareness also made him vulnerable to the darker aspects of life, leading him down paths of self-medication and addiction. It was a mind that never switched off. The same analytical tool that could brilliantly deconstruct the flawed logic of a political argument could also turn inward, dissecting his own flaws, his own failures, with merciless precision. For a mind like that, addiction isn't just a search for a high, it's a desperate search for silence, a way to turn off the relentless internal critic. His personal battles, instead of diminishing his art, arguably made his humor more authentic, more relatable, and certainly more profound. Audiences sensed the raw honesty in his jokes, the lived experience that informed his cynical observations. He wasn't just telling jokes, he was telling truths, often uncomfortable ones about himself and the human condition. But ultimately, despite his profound insights and the support of his friends and family, those personal battles became too much to bear. The weight of internal conflict, amplified by the relentless demands of a life in comedy, eventually exacted a price that was too high. His story is a powerful reminder that even the most brilliant minds and seemingly resilient personalities can be grappling with unseen torments, fighting a war that no one else can see. The tragic circumstances of Greg Giraldo's death, at just 44 years old, from an accidental overdose of prescription medication, sent shockwaves through the comedy community and beyond. It wasn't just the loss of a talent, it was the loss of a vibrant, complex individual in the prime of his career. And it sparked a difficult, introspective conversation that continues to echo. But to truly understand the depth of that shock, one must look at the final, heartbreaking details of his last days. In late September 2010, Greg was where he had spent so much of his professional life, on the road. He was scheduled for a weekend of performances at the Stress Factory Comedy Club in New Brunswick, New Jersey. It was a routine gig, another set of shows in a career built on them. But on Saturday, September 25th, he failed to show up for his performance. For a professional as dedicated as Giraldo, this was an immediate and alarming red flag. Concerned calls went unanswered. The club's owner, Vinnie Brand, alerted the staff at the Hyatt Regency Hotel where Greg was staying. When they entered his room, they found him unconscious. The scene was not one of a wild party, but of a quiet, solitary tragedy. He had suffered an accidental overdose of the prescription medications he had been taking for years to manage his anxiety and mental health struggles. There were no illicit drugs involved, which made the event all the more insidious, a testament to the quiet, creeping danger of a dependency that hides in plain sight, prescribed by doctors and carried in a toiletry bag. He was rushed to Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital and placed on life support, but the damage was too severe. For 4 agonizing days, he lay in a coma as friends and family, including his recently estranged wife Marianne and his 3 young sons, held a desperate vigil, praying for a miracle. The comedy world held its breath with an outpouring of support and love from peers who had long feared this day would come. But there was to be no recovery. The overdose had deprived his brain of oxygen for too long, leaving him with irreversible damage. Faced with an impossible and heartbreaking decision, his family chose to remove him from life support. Greg Giraldo passed away on September 29th, 2010. His death was not a sudden, violent event, but a slow clinical fading away in a hospital bed, which in many ways felt even more tragic. It wasn't the fiery exit of a rock star, but the quiet, lonely end of a man who was fighting a war inside his own mind. This raised the question, was it simply a tragic accident, a momentary lapse that led to an unforeseen outcome? Or was it a more profound, more alarming sign of deeper systemic issues within the entertainment industry, particularly concerning mental health and substance abuse among performers? This wasn't a finger-pointing exercise, but a sincere attempt to understand the forces at play. The debate taps into the age-old tragic trope of the sad clown, the idea that those who make us laugh the hardest are often wrestling with the deepest pain. With Giraldo, this wasn't just a cliche. It felt like a diagnosis. His comedy was born from a place of hyper-awareness. He saw the world's flaws, its hypocrisies, and its absurdities with a clarity that was both a gift for his comedy and a curse for his peace of mind. For many comedians, the stage is a temporary escape, a place where they can control the narrative and turn their anxieties into laughter. But what happens when the lights go down? For Giraldo, it seems the switch that powered his brilliant analytical mind never truly turned off, leaving him to grapple with a constant stream of self-criticism and existential dread. Some argued passionately that the high-pressure, late-night lifestyle of a touring comedian was a significant contributing factor. Think about the environment: constant travel, the profound loneliness of hotel rooms, the irregular hours that disrupt any sense of normalcy. You're living out of a suitcase, disconnected from your family and support systems. Then there's the perpetual demand to be on and funny, even when facing personal turmoil. The adrenaline of performance, that incredible high of commanding a room and eliciting roars of laughter, is inevitably followed by an equally profound crash. That void, that sudden silence after the show, often creates a fertile ground for self-medication, a way to either prolong the high or numb the fall. And let's not forget, beneath the artistic drive, there was a very real, very pressing need to make a living. Giraldo had a family, 3 sons he adored, and the relentless grind of the road was how he provided for them. This wasn't just about chasing applause, it was about paying the mortgage. This financial pressure adds another layer of weight to every gig, turning the need to be funny from a passion into a high-stakes necessity. The option to take a break, to step back and heal, is a luxury many performers, even successful ones, simply can't afford. This immense burden of being the provider, coupled with the emotional toll of the job, creates a perfect storm. Beyond the general pressures, there's the specific culture of the comedy world itself. The post-show hang is a sacred ritual, a time for comedians to decompress, network, and workshop ideas. But it's a ritual that often revolves around bars and late nights, creating an environment where heavy drinking and substance use are not just accepted but normalized. For someone with addictive tendencies, this world is a minefield. It lacks the structure of a 9-to-5 life, the very structure Giraldo abandoned when he left law. There are no clear boundaries, no built-in accountability. Your workplace is a nightclub, and your colleagues are often engaged in the same high-risk behaviors. This isn't to condemn the culture, but to acknowledge its inherent dangers for a vulnerable mind. There's no single easy answer to these questions, and the debate is less about assigning blame and more about fostering understanding and seeking preventive measures. Greg's death forced many to confront uncomfortable truths about the dark side of a profession that thrives on laughter. It became a tragic case study in a pattern seen too many times before with talents like Chris Farley, Mitch Hedberg, and later Robin Williams, geniuses who carried an immense weight. It left countless people, fans, peers, and industry insiders, wondering if enough was being done or could be done to support artists struggling with addiction and mental health challenges. Was there an infrastructure to catch them before they fell? Greg's passing wasn't just the loss of a brilliant comedian. It was a profound wake-up call, a stark, painful reminder that behind the laughter, behind the bravado, behind the polished performances, there can be immense, silent, personal struggles. His story became a cautionary tale, but also a catalyst for greater awareness and hopefully more proactive support for those who walk a similar path. For many fans, especially those who grew up with him, Giraldo represents a tragic figure, a star extinguished before reaching his full potential. There is a persistent sense of what if, a deep sadness for the talent that was yet to be fully explored. Beyond his classic roast, his albums and specials remain timeless examples of thoughtful, expertly constructed comedy that challenged audiences. He proved that you didn't need to dumb down your material to be successful. You could challenge your audience with complex ideas. His fame continues to endure in the digital age. On YouTube, clips of his performances are constantly discovered and shared, introducing his genius to a new generation. However, his most significant legacy is perhaps the conversation his death amplified. In the wake of his passing, the comedy community became noticeably more open about mental health and addiction. Ultimately, Greg Giraldo was an unforgettable blend of extraordinary talent, incisive intellect, and profound personal struggle. His story reminds us that sometimes the sharpest minds carry the heaviest burdens, and that we should always look beyond the punchline to the complex, vulnerable human being behind the mic. And that wraps up today's video. If this video resonated with you, please give it a like, leave a comment with your feedback, and subscribe to stay updated on upcoming videos. Appreciate you watching.